Hey everybody, this is TCG Productions here, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit interesting. In fact, actually a lot of interesting. So, beside me here, I have a couple of CRT monitors. I've got an Acer Acros View 33 here. You may or may not be able to see it. And then, most definitely almost out of sight of the camera, we've got an Apple Multiple Scan 14 display. So, I'm just going to go ahead and apologize in advance for if something's out of frame for a while that needs to be in frame or vice versa, because the display on this camcorder has gone a little bit wacko. Yeah, I think there's a loose connection on the display or a potentially faulty flex ribbon, because whenever the display is in a certain position or it goes past a certain point, it just whites out. So like it's getting power, but it's just not actually receiving either a clock signal or it's not actually receiving pixel information. So yeah, that's something that will be taken care of at some point between now and the end of the 28th century. so anyways, let's go ahead and pan over and get a look at the displays in question. Yeah, they were almost definitely out of sight. So yeah, right here we've got the Acer Acros View 33. This monitor was manufactured in the 46th week of 1991. So November of 1991. And this other monitor was manufactured about 4 years later in November 1995. So, but yeah, let me kind of explain what the methodology is and what the deal is here. So this monitor here, both of these monitors have 13-inch picture tubes in them. One of those picture tubes is a whole lot better than the other. And you can probably take a guess as to which one it is. So basically, the picture tube in this monitor, I believe, is either an EGA or even a CGA resolution picture tube. That is, the native resolution of the monitor is far below VGA resolution. And as we can see here, that is indeed a VGA connector on this monitor. So this is definitely a VGA capable monitor chassis that is in here. And I've run it up to 800 by 600. I've tried running it at 1024 by 768, but I could not get the horizontal frequency to lock. It just sat there, and it just sat there like a washing machine on the spin cycle. I could not get it to lock at 1024 by 768, which is a Super VGA resolution for anybody who's curious about that. So, but yeah, the picture tube in this monitor, its native resolution is far below VGA resolutions. That is 720 by 400, 640 by 480, and 800 by 600. And I imagine that if I could get this monitor to lock at a Super VGA resolution, it would be a horrible headache-inducing mess. And 800 by 600 is already a horrible headache-inducing mess because that is far above the native resolution of the picture tube. So I've grown pretty tired of that, and I know that the picture tube in this monitor, this Apple Multiple Scan 14 display, that is very much definitely a Super VGA capable. This monitor has a Super VGA capable picture tube in it, because I have run it at 1024 by 768, and it is very much a it definitely produces a very readable, very clear picture. Now, the picture tube in this monitor certainly has a lot more hours on it than in the Acer Acros monitor, and this monitor, if you can't tell, is falling apart. Well, the case plastics are. Yep, 1990s Apple plastics, the bane of any Apple collector. The bane of any Apple computer equipment collector. These case plastics are so fragile that you can just break, you can probably breathe on them sideways while giving it a stern look, and it'd probably shatter into 1,000 pieces. So this monitor, in my opinion, is not safe to operate. I mean, the plastics are cracking all over it. There's a massive hole in the top of the case, and yeah, I do not want to operate this monitor anymore. So, I mean, it works. It's going to be parted out. Hopefully keep other monitors like it up and running. But this monitor's time has come, in my opinion. And so it will be donating its parts. Now, the picture tube that is in the Acer Acros, monitor, that picture tube is very strong and still very healthy. It's just been paired up with a chassis that really needs a better picture tube. So, I have had both of these monitors open. I've compared the pinouts and whatnot. Everything seems to be identical. So I imagine, I've even compared the mounting patterns, and everything seems to be identical, so I don't think I'm going to have too much of a problem swapping the picture tubes over. Now, the picture tube in the Apple Multiple Scan 14, that is a Changhua branded picture tube. And obviously, of Chinese or Taiwanese origin. However, the picture tube in this Acer Acros monitor is, believe it or not, a Hitachi-made picture tube. Probably made in Japan. And I would not be surprised if it was just old stock that was being used up, given how it's a CGA or EGA picture tube. Whereas the picture tube in the Apple Multiple Scan display was probably made sometime earlier in 1995. So, anyways, both these monitors have been sitting unplugged for unplugged or switched off for quite some time. I've already got the workbench prepped, I took the liberty of clearing everything off of it, so that way I could set down towels and blankets to protect the picture tubes, the faces of both picture tubes, because I do want to keep the Hitachi picture tube that I will be removing from the Acer Acros monitor. So, and again, I know I said this in the video preface, but again, I cannot stress this enough. Loose picture tubes can be incredibly, incredibly dangerous. Same with working on a CRT monitor in general. If you have a heart condition or a pacemaker or are otherwise electrically sensitive, do not attempt anything you're about to see in this video and seek qualified help. So, with all of that out of the way and everything like that, I'd say it's time we break out the toolbox and get this show rolling. So, first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead, pop the base off of the Acer Acros. Go ahead and grab a long screwdriver and go ahead and pull the 4 screws out that hold the case on. And go ahead and start disassembling this monitor. So, one thing that I really want to stress the importance of is making sure that both CRTs, both picture tubes, are fully discharged before you actually begin handling them. Because to have a picture tube like this implode is never a good thing. Even these small picture tubes can be incredibly dangerous if or when they implode, because they will throw glass everywhere in all directions. It will shake up the phosphorus on the very front. It will shake up the phosphorus on the front glass, and it will go ahead and make that all kinds of airborne. It's just bad news for everybody and everything involved. It's a horrible mess, and it can be it is extremely hazardous. So, So, and the reason I mention those two things together in that particular order is if you should be carrying a picture tube and you get a good zap off of it, you're probably going to drop said picture tube. And if you drop a picture tube, it's probably going to implode when it hits the ground. So, make sure the picture tube is fully discharged before you begin to handle it. So, I mean, if anything, take a good solid jumper clip and clip it to the anode connection on the picture tube. Clip one into the anode connection on the picture tube and clip the other end to one of the mounting bolts or mounting tabs on the corner of the picture tube. And that should keep it discharged. So, as we can see here, this is a pretty densely packed monitor, and there's going to be a lot to take apart to get this thing to a point where this picture tube can come out. Basically, the entire monitor has to come apart. So, and we'll go ahead and compare and contrast a little bit with the Apple multiple scan display. I don't have to take the screws out because all of the mounting bolts, all of the screw stalks have already snapped clean off in the monitor. So just that's it. And this monitor, again, is suffering from Apple plastic syndrome. So there are going to be little pieces of it all over the place by the end of this, more than likely. I mean, a piece fell out right here. I don't know if you can... Yeah, this piece fell out whenever I took the cover off. I'm not reassembling this. This is going to be a one-way journey for this monitor. And, yeah. This monitor looks like it's going to be much easier to disassemble, because we've just got a circuit board here that looks like just about everything unplugs, and then it just slides out on a pair of rails, or I could just give it a stern look and breathe on it hard, and it'd probably snap the rails off and it'd just fall out. Definitely some screws that will have to come out, but so far everything appears to be either friction fit or plug in. Really, the only exception is going to be some wiring that goes to the neck board on this monitor. The neck board will have to come off with the neck board is obviously going to have to come off, and it's going to have to come out with this main circuit board, because there's some wiring on it. That is hard soldered at both ends. It does not disconnect. So I don't know if that was just a manufacturing a design oversight, or what the deal is. And I'm going to have to turn this monitor around. There we go. So, this monitor has not been powered up in quite some time. So, there should be no static. There shouldn't be any charged capacitors left behind on it or anything. And the other monitor has been also powered down for quite some time. So, I mean, I can kind of get the display to cooperate, but for the most part it's just an awful unreadable mess. I think I've got this decently in view. So I'll go ahead and start unplugging stuff. Go and disconnect the degaussing coil. And let's see, anything else on that side? Doesn't really look like it. So next thing I'll do is I'll gently, emphasis on gently here, remove the neck board, unplug. That's Casper, he's barking. unplug the neck board from the picture tube, and then I've got probably a 6.3 volt filament wire here. It comes off the flyback. It's not red, so it's probably not high voltage. And then I've got a black ground wire here that just connects to the aquadag. Well, it connects to the ground strap that grounds the aquadag on the monitor. And then there's a ground lug here. It is soldered in place. I don't know why they felt the need to solder it, but okay. But that means that the neck board, that means that the signal cable has to stay attached. Let me see. This here is the degaussing coil, and this usually fires whenever the monitor is first turned on. And what this does is it removes any stray magnetic field that might be on the picture tube when the monitor is turned on. So that's what that's what this here is for. I don't know if you can see that or not. But this plugs into a connector on the board here. So this right here is the high voltage anode connection. Now, before I disconnect that, let me go ahead and grab a decently sized screwdriver. And let me see. I have no idea whether this jumper clip lead is good or not, because I've got a few of these jumper leads that have flaky connections. And so before I use this to discharge the picture tube, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my meter in resistance mode. And okay, this seems to be okay. So I'll use that. What I'll do is I'll clip one end of this to the screwdriver, and the other end of this goes to a mounting lug on a corner of the picture tube, or I could just clip to the aquadag spring. Then slide the screwdriver up in here and touch the anode connection on the CRT. And that should be enough to discharge the picture tube. And flip this flap up, press in, and there we go. It is out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the screwdriver into the anode connection. And move one end of the clip lead onto this anode connection. Maybe. Maybe the clip lead is just going to fight me the entire time, and this will be a null, and this just won't work. There we go. I think that'll do for now. The reason I'm grounding the picture tube like this is because these picture tubes, these are effectively giant capacitors that filter the high voltage DC. The high voltage DC, I think it's DC, that gets fed to the anode connection on the picture tube. And since the picture tube is basically a giant glass capacitor, it likes to build up what's known as a stray charge. And what a stray charge is not whenever your credit card gets compromised. No, it's a stray charge is a charge that builds up on a capacitor just from it merely existing. because they sometimes like to just collect electrons out of the air, or in the case of something rubbing on something else, like this blanket here that I've set down, it'll collect charge as it moves on the blanket. And so by keeping this picture tube grounded like this, it should prevent any stray charge from building up. So there's a zip tie over here that I need to cut, and that should free up the degaussing coil. Nope. There's another zip tie on the side over here that needs to be cut. As we can see, well, as we can kind of see, we got that's just a degaussing coil rubbing against something. We have the branding on the picture tube. Chunghwa. Let me see. CPT. I don't know. I don't recognize that. I mean, I've seen it before. Warning, this picture tube employs integral implosion protection. Replaced with a tube of the same type number for continued safety. Well, there's not going to be a picture tube going back into this monitor, so I don't think we have to worry about that. There's a sticker over here that has a few numbers on it, one of which is 9322. So this may actually be a 1993 era picture tube rather than a 1995 picture tube. We do have a JVC deflection yoke, and another thing that I'm going to have to do is all of the convergence hardware on the neck of the picture tube is going to have to be, all of this convergence hardware is going to have to be stripped off. So that way I can remove, this yoke, so that way I can take this yoke and remove it from the picture tube, because these yokes, you're not supposed to transplant these yokes between different chassis, I don't think. So, and that means we're basically going to have to do a convergence setup on this monitor. We're basically going to have to do a convergence setup once we get this picture tube swapped in. So, I don't believe you're supposed to swap these, I don't believe you're supposed to swap these yokes between chassis and between different monitor chassis, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong in that matter. So feel free to leave a note down in the comments. So feel free to leave a comment if I am indeed wrong. So just to make things easier, go ahead and unplug the yoke. It does look like a standard 4-pin yoke connection. So, I mean, it could swap over. I might stop the video and have a look before I go to the trouble of stripping all the convergence hardware off of the picture tube. I will do. I'll go ahead and get the degaussing coil out of here. There's the connector. Set this off to the side. So, I'll probably stop the recording and go look to see if I can safely swap yokes between picture tubes. Well, not between picture tubes, between chassis, or if I am actually going to have to strip all of the convergence hardware off. So, but we do have some connectors over here that need to be unplugged. So, I think I've got everything reasonably in view there. And if I can find where I put my screwdriver, that would be lovely at the moment. There it is. So there's a ground strap being held in with the screw here. So that needs to come out. And I'll just go ahead and throw that back in. There's a few connectors over here. And another one right here that is tabbed in. Thankfully that tab released pretty easily. And let's see, this goes somewhere. This wire goes somewhere. Where does that wire go? Alright, it goes to a stud way down here next to the flyback. It's just a ground. And you cut this zip tie. That comes out. Basically what I'm trying to do at the moment is get all of these connections to the main board here disconnected. So that way I can go ahead and pull this out and get it out of the way, because that will help out significantly. I think I have. So now it's time for the moment of truth. And look at that. We are out. So this is set to the side here, and this probably comes further apart, but I'm afraid in doing so that it will just simply destroy everything. Yeah, that came out, and heard the all too familiar sound of shattering plastics. And then this appears to be just molded into place. I don't think that's going to hamper getting the picture tube. I don't think that's going to hamper getting the picture tube out of place. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the, I'm going to go ahead and basically get the picture tube loose. And there's these mounting lugs on the corners of the picture tube. So this bolt, well, this screw actually goes into a screw stalk in the front, basically in the front case. And so this comes out. It's got a big washer on it. That comes out, and then there's this little clip here, probably acting as some sort of washer looking thing. And then this comes out, and that exposes the raw corner of the tube. And this corner here is part of the integral implosion band. And basically what that does is it evenly distributes the force of the atmosphere pushing in on it around the tube to make it less likely that the tube would implode given if it is physically abused. And if this implosion band is ever cut, you need to be incredibly careful. If this implosion band is ever cut or otherwise violated, because then the picture tube is at much greater risk of implosion because the forces of the atmosphere pushing in on it are not being evenly redistributed. And speaking of redistributing, I'm going to disconnect this clip lead and move it to the corner of the picture tube that I just took the mounting hardware off of. So the Aquadag grounding strap and everything is probably going to come out. Yeah, it's hooked in. One end of it is hooked in right there. I'm saving all the hardware that's coming off of here. So that way if someone else needs this hardware, it's available. Circuit board in there. Have a connector here that connects the ground, that connects the chassis ground to the aquadag ground, or connects the aquadag ground to the chassis ground. And this spring right here comes out and unhooks, and that releases the aquadag ground. And there's another spring on this next corner. So and this monitor also has a couple of speakers, which I'm a little bit afraid to try to remove because the plastics are probably just going to shatter apart. Like that. So, crunch. Go ahead and rotate this again. See that we are well out of frame of the camera. Bring this in a little bit. There we go. And there's a circuit board in here that I'm going to, a couple of circuit boards in here actually, that I'm just going to go ahead and take out. Given the length of these screw stalks, yeah, just shattering the top of the stalk. This other one's probably going to do it just the same. Yep, it's all coming apart. There's a reason why this monitor is getting parted out. So that gets one cable out of the way. This is the this board here basically adjusts the picture on the tube. And then there's another circuit board down here that I'm going to remove. Crunch, crunch, Apple Plastics. And this is a headphone jack. Here's a screw. And so that cleans things up quite nicely in this corner. So now I should be able to go ahead and back this screw out. And remove this mounting thing. I suppose they put this on here. I suppose they put these on here before they actually mounted the tube into place. But they seem to be coming out just fine with the picture tube still in place. Now the picture tube is almost free to come out. There's just one more corner over here. And so, I'm going to take my screwdriver, crunch, and pull that screw out. Now, I can lift the picture tube up ever so slightly to get that out. Now the picture tube is, for all intents and purposes, loose. The only thing that's really keeping it steady is the fact that it's still in this plastic, and that it's still sitting in this plastic case thanks to gravity. And so for now, this is where, and so I'm going to go ahead and stop recording here for now and see if I can actually safely move this yoke over to the other chassis, or if I need to go ahead and do a yoke transplant. So I will be back at some point or another in the future. Okay, I am back. done some looking, and the general consensus seems to be fairly mixed as far as transplanting the yoke. But I did see some probably pretty good advice is to go and turn the screen or the G2 control all the way down on the flyback before you actually power the set on. So I just went ahead and did that. And so now it's time to start prepping this monitor to be tube swapped. And this is going to be fairly complicated because there's a lot of stuff that has to be unplugged in a number of places. So yeah, there's a power connector, there's a power switch, so that is unplugged. And yeah, they did mount those in opposite directions to make it easy, so that way you don't accidentally plug them in the wrong way around. There's a zip tie there. And there's a zip tie here that needs to come out. And let's see. Power connector is way up here. I'm not sure if you can see that. It looks like you mostly can. Unplug the power connector. And I'm going to get this screw out. And that starts the process of letting us get this thing apart. So, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and wiggle the neck board off of the picture tube. And I know you can't see this, but there's a ground that I just unplugged. And then there's a few things here. Plug that, unplug that, and that just leaves the focus, and we see focus and G2 wires attached. Those cannot be disconnected. And let's see, signal wiring. So now I'm going to see if I can't get the display cable out of here. There's a screw right here. That has to come out. That releases a ground strap that goes to the neck board and allows me to pull this back shielding off. Normally I wouldn't be able to do that, but I've already gone and cut and unsoldered all of the connectors off of that. And then there is a strain relief here. I'm not going to mess with that. So this whole thing is free to come out once I remove this screw right here, which grounds the probably a heat sink around the flyback. And then there's a screw right here. Looks like it's got a ground washer on it. And this whole thing comes away, takes the input power connector and the VGA cable with it. So it makes this easier, much easier to gain access to. There's a very large connector over here. And not quite sure how that unplugs. It looks like I just got to pull it. There we we go. And way down in here somehow, somewhere, there's a connector that goes into a sleeved wire that goes down. I do not know where it goes. I think it might go to an LED somewhere. No, it goes to the degaussing coil. I haven't seen the degaussing work on this monitor, like ever. So I will be curious to see if this will somehow make it work. If doing this picture tube swap will jostle things around enough to make that work. So that's out. There's a connector there. It comes out. And I think that gets our power supply. I think that gets our power supply board totally freed up. And so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. And this whole thing should just lift right out of the monitor. That's a brace that I just undid. Here's another tubular style brace. And then there's a couple of mounting screws off camera that probably cannot be seen. A little bit difficult to get my screwdriver positioned in there since the end is quite strongly magnetized. And we are out. It has been a minute since I've done that, and the last time I had to do it was because it had to come apart due to a cold solder joint somewhere. So this monitor gets miserably hot when it's plugged in. Well, not plugged in, when it's powered on. And I might add a fan to this thing before we're all done. Alright, we have an analog adjustment board that connects in like 17 different places. That needs to come off. Unplug that. And since I'm working around the neck of the picture tube, I need to be really careful so as to avoid more or less necking the picture tube, because that is that's a fatal mistake for the picture tube. You don't do that more than once. There's a bundle zip tie here. I'm going to cut out. See, it looks like the 6.3 volt heater wire. Out. I'm going to go ahead and get this back brace off of here that I know you can't see. But since the display on my camcorder is, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit on the fritz, trying to move the camera around every which way is a gigantic pain at the moment. And I really do need to get that fixed. So that screw is out, the brace is out, and then unplug that. And then there's a ground that goes to the aquadag on the tube. Now it's time to ground this picture tube. If I can get to my box of jumper clips and leads, which is proving to be a challenging task at the moment. Oh, ow. Adjustment dial fell off of the Apple monitor, and I just stepped on it. Put all my weight onto that thing for a half second. It's not fun. I don't recommend you do that. And now it's time to play a game of which one of these works and which one of these doesn't. Because I don't want to use one that doesn't work, because that's how a picture tube implosion may or may not happen. I don't want a picture tube imploding on me today. And it looks like I've gotten a crappy one. Yeah, the ohms reading should not be jumping around like that. Let's try a yellow one. Some of these don't even have both their ends on them, because the terrible spliced connections just completely came apart. And yeah, that's not jiving. Oh, this is the one I've gotten. Yeah, there it went away for a moment. Yeah, some of these don't even have both of their ends on them, because the terrible splices came completely apart. Let's see, can I just jiggle this around? Okay, that seems to be the most stable, so we'll use that. And I really need to go ahead and get some new jumper clips that I can trust. And you're not going to be able to see this because I'll be over here on the opposite side of the monitor, but it's the same exact song and dance. It's more or less the same exact song and dance. One end clips to the screwdriver, other end clips to the corner of the implosion band, which is integrally grounded to the aquadag. Slip the screwdriver in, touch the anode, lever it off the picture tube. And there we go. Tube is grounded. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get the other parts of this thing out. Starting with this brass, probably a brass rod here. Gets that out of the way, makes it not so cluttered up. And then there's two screws down here. That come out. And once those two screws are out, I should be able to lift this board up and completely remove it and the neck board from the monitor. And I just realized that I forgot to unplug the yoke. Okay, come on, there we go. I'll dig in here, unplug the yoke, and this board comes out and leaves a picture for now. And no 6-foot flames whenever I set it down, so that's always a good sign. So,
Toes fixed.
okay. The ground strap just came off, and so that comes out. The mounting methodology that this picture tube uses is much simpler than the mounting methodology used by the Apple multiple scan display. Because here, there's rubber, basically rubber sleeves that go down over the screw stalks And it's just a screw with a big washer on it that basically forms a sandwich. And just like that, picture tube, I believe, is ready to come out. So my next challenge is going to be removing the picture tube from the monitor. I don't want to really pick it up by the yoke, because that could come unseated at any time, and the end result would probably be an implosion. So I think I might be able to lever it out of there like that. The gouging coil may or may not go with the tube. Just looking at this, okay, it will not go with the tube. And then, if everything goes according to plan, I should just be able to go ahead and drop it. Go ahead, take this picture tube out and set it aside. Kind of clear space off for that. And then take the other picture tube and set it straight into place here. And then go from there. So this is where the hazardous part of the operation begins. The really hazardous part of the operation, because now we're going to have loose picture tubes, which is not a great thing. And yes, this monitor has unfortunately suffered shipping damage at the hands of United Parcel Smashers, as UXW Bill will call, as UXW Bill sometimes not very affectionately calls them, and my camera display is wigging out, which of course makes it irritatingly hard to figure out where the camera is looking and what's in frame and out of frame and left and right of frame, who's on first and what's on second, and I don't know who's on third. So what I'm going to have to do is this picture tube needs to spin around 180 degrees whenever I install it. And I hope these pins will connect. So this picture tube, I'm going to have to spin this tube around 180 degrees before I set it down. As I said, this monitor has unfortunately suffered shipping damage at the hands of the United Parcel Smashers. Basically, one of these monitors I currently have, well, I had it 180 degrees rotated relative to the other one. And so now I'm not going to have to spin the picture tube 180 degrees, but I'm still going to have to pick the tube up and set it down into the other monitor's frame. So here goes nothing. This is a heavy tube. We are in place for the most part. That went better than I thought, actually. And so now, I believe it is just the matter of transferring the grounding hardware from this picture tube over to our other picture tube. But so far it's looking like we might be off to an excellent start here. So before I get too deep into things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the analog board back into place here on the chassis. I can't remember which way all this went. Temporarily unground the picture tube and immediately reground it. See if see if the yoke connector will plug right in. I really hope it does. Or else this just got 11 times harder. Yeah, the pins are slightly different. I'll have to see. I'll be back. Okay, I am back. A period of several hours later. Transferring the connectors over for the yokes did not quite go as planned. So basically the pins on the yoke that is on the CRT that I put in there wasn't quite the right size, and what I ended up having to do is de-pin that, basically de-pin the connector off of it, and then use a set of pliers and modify those pins so that way they would get a secure fit on the pins in the monitor here. And I believe I've got everything hooked up properly. I'm just going to go back through my photos one more time and make sure. Yeah, I believe I've got the yoke plugged in right, and I think I've got it all back together. So what do you suppose we plug the power cord in, fire it up, and have ourselves the realest smoke test we've had in a while, so to speak. Just double checking. Monitor power switch is off. Workbench power switch is off. That is a DVI cable. Got a power cord. The power cord is plugged in. Double check the fire extinguisher on the wall. So, going to turn the power switch on the monitor and throw in the workbench power strip in 3, 2, 1. Hey! I heard it come up. No smoke yet. Of course, I have no idea what it's displaying, if anything. I just turned the power switch off. I have no idea if it displayed anything. I don't think it did, given how I had the G2. I currently have the G2 control on the flyback turned all the way down. So the tube should not be getting biased on. And so I think the next logical step is to get this somewhere where we can see where A, we can see what's happening, and B, it's not sitting on something grounded. So that way the angry pixies that light up this tech room and make technology work like we expect it to do not find an unexpected and very rapid path to ground, which would cause an actual smoke test failure. So go and unplug that. And yes, I did actually have the thought of mine to reconnect the signal cable, the VGA cable. I did want to show me putting the monitor back together, but unfortunately, I was kind of concerned making sure that everything would fit back together properly and whatnot. And due to the kind of ersatz nature of the yoke connections on the picture tube, I wasn't sure if those were going to arc out or not, because if I heard anything arcing, I was going to have to dump the power immediately so as to avoid setting fire to things and other awful and other highly productive stuff of that nature. So I'll set the monitor down just like so. Well, let's go brightness and contrast all the way up, power switch off. Yes, this picture tube does have a scratch on the front of it. I unintentionally did that whenever I was acquiring the monitor that this picture tube came out of almost a year ago. So I need to scooch this thing on over in order to get it within reach of the power cord. This power strip is off. So go ahead and position that. Turn the monitor power switch on. Workbench power strip in 3, 2, 1. Smoke test number 2. High voltage came up. Keeping all appendages far, far away from the CRT at the moment, in case this thing does decide it wants to let out the magic smoke. I just turned the monitor's power switch off and back on. The horizontal section seems to be approving of the donor yoke, the yoke from the donor CRT that went into here. Of course, with the G2 all the way down, I don't expect to see much, if anything, on the picture tube. So I'll turn it off, let the high voltage fade away. There is usually a bleeder resistor in the high voltage section that will go ahead and bleed off the high voltage from the picture tube. And with that, I'd say it's time we go ahead and start cranking the G2 up. Brightness and contrast maxed. I guess I didn't take a picture of the flyback. Now the G2 control is also known as the screen control. I have this located. So I'll give that a quarter turn up. Throw the switch. Holy crap, that's bright. Seizure warning. I don't know just how high I had the G2 turned up, but that was way too high. So I'll give it like a 1/6 of a turn. And we'll try again. And just going by the geometry that I was seeing in that picture, I'm definitely going to need to make some adjustments. So I want to get the G2 up high enough that I do get a white image on screen. There we go. Now we're over scanning the vertical. I'm going to turn the G2 down just a little bit because that is pretty bright. Of course, I could probably make these adjustments with the power on. There seems to be a pretty fine line between absolute darkness with no signal and horrible blinding white image that everybody hates. So we'll put on some trademark safety flip-flops and start playing with the... Oh yeah, that... with the G2, and yeah, that picture is definitely a bit screwed up, and contrast doesn't seem to matter. I'll turn that down, turn the brightness all the way up, and now it's time to balance and adjust our picture. So, screwdriver bit, locate our vertical size, realize that I need a different screwdriver bit. That control is having no effect. There we go, that's doing something. There is some pin cushioning that needs to be adjusted out of the image. There we go, side pin cushion. I am making these adjustments on... Oh wow, that straightened that up quite nicely. And let's see, horizontal hold and horizontal detector, I am not going to play with those at the moment. And then we've got red drive, blue drive, red bias, green bias, blue bias, and sub-contrast. So these particular adjustments are on the neck board and are being stubborn today. And since I have no interest in necking a otherwise healthy picture tube, let's see if I can find a screwdriver bit that will let me tweak these, and apparently I'm having no such luck. So let's try the next size up instead of the next size down, see if it fits better. I'm having no such luck with that particular control. So let's try flathead. Oh, there we go. Seems a flathead fits in there much better. And that doesn't seem to be doing anything, so that may be an adjustment I have to make with the contrast turned up, or this monitor getting a live signal. Probably a live signal if I had to say. So since the aluminum shield on the neck board is deciding that it wants to take a trip elsewhere, turn the power off and push this back into place, hoping I don't unexpectedly make 6-foot flames come out of everything. So thankfully I was unsuccessful in doing that, but at the same time, turn the workbench power strip off. I was also unsuccessful in resecuring the shield on the neck board back to its proper position. It kind of wants to and kind of doesn't want to stay in place. So I think the next step is to go ahead and get this thing fed a live signal. And I think the Gateway 2000 system is going to be a good source. let me see what I can do about that. Okay, sometime later I am back once again. The camera does not do it justice. This picture tube is so much better than the old one. So, but I know you're not really able to see it, but this picture tube is significantly not as blurry as the other picture tube. I don't think you ever saw the other picture tube, but it wasn't great. I did have to give the pin cushion a tweak. I also had to give the vertical size a tweak. And I've got it adjusted out quite nicely, filling most of the screen here, most of the face of the tube, I should say. And I did have to adjust the focus control on the flyback quite a bit, but as soon as I got the focus pulled in nice and sharp, holy cow, it cleaned up good. And I did have to mess with the purity and convergence rings on the back of the tube. So there they are back there. And then the shield for the neck board has decided again to just kind of fall down back there and take a nap. So, and of course here's the leftover parts from the monitor, as well as the old picture tube, complete with yoke. So I'll probably put the wires back in the connector there and figure out how to store this picture tube, because I don't like loose picture tubes. That's a bit of a hazardous thing. So these are all the parts and pieces from the old monitor, including the grounding hardware, which is a bit of a mess. I think they had 2 or 3 of these wires strung around the tube, connecting to different places, and they also had, of course, they also had the Aquadag spring. Here we go. That was wrapped around it, so a bunch of stuff wrapped around the tube. Much simpler on this Hitachi tube. Of course, I've already transferred all of the grounding hardware off of it. That transferred over very quickly, very easily. So this tube is happy and healthy. And I didn't really have to do much in the way of anything other than just screw it in, put the monitor back together, do a little bit of setup here, and I know I didn't record the setup, but I was more focused on not putting my hand where it absolutely should not go, rather than getting good quality video footage. And it doesn't help that the display on here, the flex ribbon, is a little bit bonkers like. But yeah, I'll go ahead, get this monitor cased back up and everything, actually make it look like a proper and complete setup again, and we'll have one last look at it before we close out this video.